Welcome to another episode of Exercise Matters with me, Randall Cooper.
And me, Mick Hughes.
Support for today's episode comes from Premax Performance Skincare. If you're active, you focus on strength, endurance and recovery. But what about your skin? Sweat, friction and the elements take a toll. That's where Premax comes in. High-performance skincare made for high-performance people. From recovery creams to anti-chafe balms, massage creams to exercise-specific barrier creams, we help your skin go the distance. Keep your skin as fit as your body with Premax. Available now at premax.co.
And support for today's episode also comes from Learn.Physio. Health professionals, are you staying ahead of the game? Learn.Physio brings you cutting-edge education from world-class experts in sports and musculoskeletal medicine. Online courses, hands-on practicals and expert resources, all backed by the latest evidence and designed to fit into your busy schedule. To be your best, learn from the best. Get started today at Learn.Physio.
Well, g'day mate, how are you?
Mate, fit as a fiddle, fighting fit, always good on a Monday when we get to chat and catch up.
We're coming into the holiday and summer season as we're speaking here in Australia. What do you got planned? You got any what are your kind of life or fitness goals over the next couple of months?
We're actually going to Canada for Christmas. A little white Christmas celebrated in Canada, in Banff region. It's not a skiing holiday so much, but we will sneak a day in, and provided no one in the family has done it other than me. I snowboarded 25 years ago once, and
right.
So I'm the family expert, obviously. So depending on how the rest of the family goes, we might sneak in a second day. But as it stands, I think we'll be all novices fighting for our lives on the slopes of Banff on a day. But other than that, just taking it all in. And exercise-wise, I'm just trying to get as fit and as strong as I can before I take 3 weeks off to enjoy the silly season, mate. What about you?
I'm just, as always, Mick, I'm just working through. So some of us need to keep the economy and the business going, mate. So as always, that will be me. But I'm just going to prepare you for it. It is going to be quite an abrupt change from, particularly you're going from Townsville to Banff. There's one year that I was working with our national ski team. I had to leave Melbourne at 35 degrees Celsius, and then I went to Montreal, which was minus 20 degrees Celsius. I took a bit over 24, about 30 hours to get there. 50-degree turnaround in a day, basically. So that.
Yeah, we're expecting that. We actually put on all our thermals and snow jackets and snow gear the other day. It was a 34-degree day here in town. We did have the aircon on, but we sat in all our gear for a good probably 10, 15 minutes. Even with the aircon on, everyone was just complaining about how hot and sweaty it was inside. So it's comforting to know that all the gear we've got is going to be protecting us from the elements in cold Canada. But it's going to be a huge swing. Yeah, so I can't wait. It's going to be a good time.
Good. I'm jealous. I think you'll have a great time. All right. Yeah. Well, last week this is part of two. There's a 2-part series that we're doing at the moment. This is the second part of us talking about Zone 2 training. So if you're just new to the podcast or you skipped last week, I'd suggest you go back and have a listen to that one first, because we've got a terrific guest, Sebastian Sitko from Spain, who's a world expert on Zone 2 training, just written a paper about it. And we talk about exactly like what Zone 2 is, what thresholds are, what the elite athletes are doing, how much time they're spending there. We didn't quite get time to talk about fat metabolism, so I might just touch on that really quickly before we kind of get into the main component of this episode, and that's the relationship and how people should look at Zone 2 versus kind of high-intensity interval training or threshold training. So, I'm looking forward to chatting through this one as well, mate.
Yep. Well, I learned a ton from last episode. I certainly have underappreciated the intensity of Zone 2. I always thought, or maybe even overappreciated, whichever way you look at it, but I definitely thought you would have had to train a lot harder and a little bit more intense to get the benefits of Zone 2. But according to Sebastian, it's certainly a bit more on the easier side of our rate of perceived exertion, on our lower end of our max heart rate calculation. So that was Yes, a big take home from me. So yeah, can't wait to sort of see how I can plug this into my Norwegian 4x4s, which, by the way, is going really well still, mate. So if anyone was wondering, it's
Very good. Well,
feeling good.
after these 2 episodes and also your time to think about it with a clear head in Canada, I'll be interested in 2026 how you actually kind of structure up your aerobic work and how you interplay that 4x4 with this Zone 2 work also.
New year, new me. So look out, 2026.
Yep. We ran out of time last week. I did have in my notes had a couple of points just to kind of make around how Zone 2, what's touted anyway, essentially is kind of like known as the fat burning zone. And it does, like definitely like the papers there. And one, if you're interested in this thing, this topic, I should say, Inigo San Milan, who's a big name in this area, he talks about this quite a lot on podcasts and he's written quite a few papers on it as well. And he talks about how the body learns to actually burn fat as the fuel. The mitochondria actually utilize fat at the Zone 2 a lot better when you train there a lot. And then as a consequence, then it also then allows better what they call metabolic flexibility. So your body's ability to either burn fat for fuel, think about that as your diesel engine, or burning glycogen in your muscles when you're doing your high intensity stuff, and the ability for your body to basically kind of switch its fuel system very efficiently and quickly between fat and carbohydrates or glucose is something that Zone 2 trains very well. Without kind of going down a rabbit hole, he'll talk about that the people who have got type 2 diabetes and whatever, that their bodies can't utilize glucose as well. And this is part of the reason. So both for health reasons and also for performance reasons, that ability for you to kind of mix your fuel source as an athlete is super important. And Zone 2 training doesn't do this uniquely, by the way, but it does probably the best out of most of the zones. So interesting point that we didn't get a chance to chat about last week.
Yeah, good to know.
We do have a guest. Again, his name is Sebastian Sitko. I kind of gave him the long intro last episode, but he's a researcher and also a coach of very high acclaim in Spain. And the paper that's basically the thread through last episode and this episode is a paper published in the International Journal of Sports Physiology and Performance this year, 2025. And the title of it is What is Zone 2 Training? An Expert's View on Definition Training Methods and Expected Adaptations. It is a free resource, so if anyone wants to read it, it's not a heavy read, by the way, so you can just download it on the internet. So, yeah, let's talk about high-intensity training. And maybe, Mick, we'll just bring it back to you because we're all fascinated with how you exercise. You're doing your 4x4s a couple of times a week, and then I think that you also walk your dog a bit as well. So it sounds like you're kind of doing the mix anyway, where you're doing a bit of low-level kind of aerobic work and then interceding that with a couple of 2 or 3 sessions of high-intensity training as well. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah. Yep. No, perfect summary. I'll do 2 Norwegian 4x4s, maybe sneak a third in on a Saturday, but that's less frequent than others. But definitely lock into Norwegian 4x4s, 2 resistance training sessions a week where I try to hang around 4 sets of 6 to 10 reps per exercise. And then, probably 5 evenings a week or 5 days a week, I'll take the dog for a walk ranging from 30 to 60 minutes, just depending on times. So, clock out a fair bit of exercise every week.
Very good. So let's go back, and we've had a couple of episodes where we've talked about high intensity interval training, or HIIT, and we know from what we've discussed previously that HIIT is a highly time efficient medium and it also has effect on mitochondria adaptations as well, actually equal or greater to Zone 2. And high intensity efforts also stimulate multiple molecular pathways, more so than low intensity alone. But the benefit of Zone 2, as we kind of touched on last week, was that it remains essential because it enables athletes to accumulate large training volumes without excessive fatigue. And I've got a couple of studies and points to kind of get through here that something that HIIT can't replace. So I think when you listen to, and I have, listened to all the experts kind of talk about this, the experts will not kind of just be in one camp. They will not say I'm just a hitter or I'm a zone twoer and nothing else. They will always talk about that you need both, and that the differences are more about cost and fatigue and training load than they are like unique biological adaptations. It's interesting stuff. I think that it's important that, like it's interesting to me that it comes back to a musculoskeletal thing as much as it is kind of like a blood physiology, exercise metabolism thing.
Yep, agree. And I just knowing, like, if you've ever trained high intensity, you know just how taxing it is, not just physically, like feeling physically exhausted, but just mentally exhausted. And like, sure, you can get away with doing it for a week or two. And how often do we see this kind of in the January period every year where people just come in all guns blazing in January, feeling really motivated to exercise. They want to sort of start the year off, and from where they're coming from to what exercise levels they're thrashing out, it's at an unsustainable level where inevitably people start walking to the clinic with injuries or start just burning out because they just can't see this being sustained ongoing, so they just give up. Inherently it probably makes sense to us, but I think from the outside it's something that you just need to have the best of both worlds, and I just don't I don't ever see a place with this just being one or the other.
And you're right, and people do that, and they will say, like, again, it gets to New Year and it's like, I'm just going to exercise, I need to drop a few kilos, I want to get fitter, etc. And they do hard training, and that hard training will deplete their glycogen stores. They're not burning fat, they're burning glucose in the muscles. Then they get hungry, and it's like, oh my God, I can't eat much because, like, I'm trying to get fitter and leaner. And then they get into this cycle of just feeling rubbish. Whereas I'm sure you'll agree with me, is sometimes when I just do like an hour and a half, brisk walk, low level swim, that kind of thing, I feel fantastic for the rest of the day. But I know that I do a heavy swimming session that goes for an hour and a quarter, and I need to sleep in the afternoon.
Yep. But we can't get it though. That's the thing. We just don't have the luxury of just having a little afternoon nap these days. But that's 100% resonate.
So I asked Sebastian about that. I asked him about, like, we know that the pros are spending like 30 hours on their bike, for instance, each week, and it's very easy for them, and they should do 80% of their training at that zone for all the reasons we've discussed. But for people who have got less time, how long should they spend in zone 2?
Yeah, if you are talking about the typical weekend warrior, I would say that the picture changes quite a bit, because in the end, you are looking, in the long term, you're trying to increase the total training load. And if you're trying to base his training only on low intensity, you will get to the roof quite early. So in general, you will have to play a little bit more with intensity. In general, with this kind of athletes, I like to use quite a lot of intensity during the week, because in general they are, they are training on their home trainer or have less time, and then use the weekend to perform these long, slightly slower sessions. But in general, you cannot use 80% of your time in zone 2 if you are training 6 hours per week.
It's a good point, and I think that his real-world kind of application of that is spot on. And you actually see that innately, with a lot of people anyway, is that during the week where you don't have a lot of time, you've got a Monday to Friday schedule, that's where you are doing your 4x4s, you're doing, interval style stuff to trying to get a bang for buck. But then on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, if you've got the time to go for that 2 or 3 hour ride or that longer run, longer bushwalk or whatever it might be, then you can do it. And that then kind of says that maybe the 80-20 split for recreational athletes may not be quite as applicable to what it is to the elite population.
Yep.
All right. So I think that one of the threads that's kind of come through till this point is that zone 2 is great. There's definitely kind of some benefits to doing it, but it's not a magic zone. There are many attributes. There are many adaptations that are attributed to zone 2, but they also do occur at nearby intensities as well. So I asked Sebastian that. I said, is zone 2 really so magic?
Once I heard a nice term, which was paralysis because of over-analysis, no? So I think that, and I think that if you're getting too much information and varying information and sometimes even contradicting information, you may not decide or choose the best options for you. And social media, the sports science divulgation in social media has this kind of setbacks. Everybody can divulgate, and I think that there are trends. We had several years ago like a trend with high intensity interval training. Now it seems that it dissipated, and now we have this trend with zone 2. I think there are no magical zones. There are several tools that you must choose the best tools for you and your case, and try to make the best use of your time. But zone 2 is not magical, zone 5 neither, and there are no magic recipes, as far as I know.
I think his point's really pertinent, and just it makes sense to me, and it feels right, because I think, like we've seen in all aspects of health and fitness and exercise, working through a spectrum of whether it's strength, hypertrophy, and in this case, aerobic training, it makes sense that you want to touch on most zones and not just exclusively follow one. And this is coming from the guy who's written essentially with his colleagues, written a consensus paper on zone 2. So I think that, is it worthwhile training in that zone? For sure. Should you exclusively be there? And is it magic? No,
that's right. And as he said, it's all user dependent. Like if you've got a specific training goal, you play sport, you've got an endurance event coming up, you have to put the work in specifically to the demands of your sport. For just the mum and dad who's just looking to start off with something, or anyone that's just looking to get off the couch for the first time and just start changing their health behaviors, any kind of movement's good movement, and something that's sustainable and doable week in, week out is kind of like the best fit. And once you've got that pattern established and you've got the motivation level sustained and you can see that it can fit in and plug into your week, where you go from that is going to be just dependent on the goals moving forward. So, look, it's that I agree. It's not a magic bullet by any means from this exercise point of view. So, I love his perspective on things. I think it's very, I don't know, it's just very sensible. Like I like listening to. I could listen to him talk all day.
Yeah, we need to give him some tips on how to say analysis by paralysis. But other than that, I thought that it did make me smile, that one. He got it out, but it must be difficult being native Spanish speaker. One of the big topics that's in endurance and training is this notion of what's called polarized training versus threshold training. So polarized training is where you spend a relatively large percentage of your training at a low intensity, i.e. zone 2, a small amount at moderate intensity, like zone 3 or 4, and a moderate amount of time in zone 4 or 5. So most of your time zone 2, a little bit moderate, a little bit hard, versus threshold training. So that involves a greater proportion of training at a moderate intensity. So let's say that's zone 3 or 4, kind of in the 5 scale thing that we've been talking about up until now. And a lot of people talk about that zone 3 being junk. It's just like you may as well be in zone 2, or you may as well kind of be pushing your threshold stuff and increasing your lactate tolerance at the top. So there was a study that was published back in 2022 by Rosenblatt et al. In Sports Medicine. And Mick, you'd be interested in this one. One of the co-authors on this was our friend Bill Vincentino. So
Bill.
Yeah.
Love it.
So Bill's part of this one.
Did he swear the whole time?
I didn't realise he was a swearer. Is that right?
Oh, loves to drop the F-bomb. Love Bill. Love his. Love it. I had a coffee with Bill when I first met him for the first time, and it was just refreshing, just hearing someone just love to use the F word every so often through a sentence.
Well, I hope Bill doesn't listen to this podcast, because I'm sure he doesn't want that shared, Mick.
I'm sure he wouldn't mind. He's a great.
He's a professor and very well respected until now.
Sorry, Bill, if you take offence. But I love you, mate. Love your work.
He has done some terrific work, so good on him. Anyway, back to the study. This was a systematic review and meta-analysis. They combined 5 RCTs, and they did compare that. They compared the polarized style of training versus a threshold intensity training style. And all the studies and the people in the studies had to do this training for a period of somewhere between 6 and 12 weeks. So what they found with the review was that Polarised training produced moderate performance advantages in time trial outcomes compared to the threshold focus programs. So it did improve times a little bit more. Both models increased VO2 max, but polarised training showed a slightly consistent advantage due to the lower accumulated fatigue. So the polarised training just allows you to stay a little bit more fresh, so you can actually train that top end just that little bit harder. Threshold training still produces meaningful physiological improvements, especially around sustainable power and pace near that LT2, so that's the upper limit of your kind of lactate threshold. But the main thing here is that the fatigue costs different. Okay, so there was more fatigue in that threshold / training group. They found it harder to kind of back up sessions, whereas the polarised group found it easier to kind of get through the week. So both models can be effective, but I think it's important that, again, if you're just kind of like a 5K runner and you just go and run 5Ks hard 4 times a week, you're actually probably better to polarise it and to do a little bit of zone 2 and a little bit of high end. You'll find that you're fresher for doing so and actually achieve more by doing so. That's what the results of this study said anyway.
It makes sense. And you kind of think of it in a way like, you train 5Ks 4 days a week, it's 20K mileage. But I guess where the thinking is there, if you have those couple of lighter days where you're just sort of just tempering it down a little bit, those high intensity days, you can put more effort in. And so you can get that intensity up that little bit greater to make that 5Ks that little bit more, I guess build a little bit of speed into it, get your time up a little bit more. So like a 20K mileage is very different from week to week, depending on how you sort of spend it and what intensity you put into it. So it's like anything, such higher intensities is completely unsustainable to back up high intensity work over and over and over again. That's why we need to have these lower days to allow our bodies to freshen up and allow some of these adaptations to come into play.
So for Sebastian, I asked him about how does he kind of create that interplay kind of between the higher intensity stuff and the lower intensity stuff. And is there any magic recipe that he has for training his own athletes?
From what I have seen in practical terms, and also from what I have seen in research papers to date, research has shown that you can get to the top of the pyramid with any kind of training intensity distribution. And there are even some very nice papers. I remember one there were 2 gold medalists in the Olympics, 2 rowers who won the gold medal. One of them was doing a total threshold intensity distribution, and the other was doing a pyramidal, and both won gold. And this example shows you that I think that what is important is the training load, the progressive and rational increase in training load over the years, and of course genetics. I do not think that there's a magical distribution that will get you there. Of course, there may be a better distribution for you, for your timetable, and even for your personal preferences. But there's no specific distribution that you can apply to all subjects and you will get the perfect results.
I love that. And that reflects my experience in performance and elite sport over, 25 years now or so. And that is that there's no magic formula for anyone, and everyone responds differently to training stimulus, and you need to individualize it. And his example of how 2 Olympic rowers won gold medals with essentially different training programs highlights the fact that you've just got to work it out for yourself. And we do, particularly now with the way that kind of, the online world works, is that you're getting served up absolutes. This is the way you have to do it. You've got to spend so many minutes doing this, so many minutes doing that. This is my doctrine. You've got to follow the doctrine. The real life application is everyone responds differently. And I really appreciate him saying that, particularly, with him being a researcher as well as a practitioner.
Yeah, and I think that's it kind of leans into what John Keeley said a few podcast episodes ago with the periodization, and definitely, Sebastian singing from that same hymn sheet that and Andrew Russell as well. We just have to work with the person sitting right in front of us, and to have a protocol, plugged from a series of athletes in a research paper where you've got this really clean, very protocol-driven study design and cut and paste it to the person sitting right in front of you. Once again, got round holes and square pegs to try and put things into more often than not. So, great lessons to be learned here. And even more so impressive is someone who is kind of that pracademic, as you mentioned in episode 1, where they deal with athletes day in, day out. They're forward facing, they're at the coalface. They're not just sitting in a lab, just basically taking VO2 max samples and then, telling everyone to jump into this certain level of training to get the best results. It's, lovely to hear.
Has the last couple of episodes, Mick, changed your view on exercising at a low intensity and how you may or may not change how many 4x4s or HIIT sessions you do each week?
Yeah, 100%. Like I think that I've got enough wriggle room there to squeeze out a third session per week of high intensity. But then also too, there's part of me that just says, just hold back, don't be greedy. For the goals that I've got in life is just to sort of be able to show up to work and show up for my family and, feel good when I get out of bed every day. Like I'm not training for a 10K event or a 20K event. I'm not training for team sports. Like my exercise habits really are just to be laying a foundation. So when I'm 60 and 70, I'm a much better person for it. So this is the work that I'm sort of laying in now. So I completely value that longer zone 2 training. And I actually, what sort of started me the zone 2 training and probably, the extra bit of exercise that I'm doing now, walking the dog, was that I told you a few episodes ago, probably at the start of the series, like my dog was getting fat and I was overweight, and I was sort of looking at my training at the time. It was like, well, where else can I fit some time in to take her for a walk? And it's like, well, I've only got half hour to 45 minutes at night time. And I was really resistant to that to start with. I was like, I just want to jump into bed at, 8:30, 9 o'clock. But I've actually really enjoyed that wind down. I take that now, that 45-minute walk or half hour, 45-minute walk, 5 nights a week with my dog is almost like my resetting and debrief of the day, where I can sort of, just clear my thoughts and digest what was good, what was bad, what I can work on better at night time. And obviously, good for my heart and lungs, good for my dog's health. So I've really embraced it. And I've learned that fits in beautifully with me. And it plugs in nicely with my 2 resistance training sessions and 2 high intensity sessions. So yeah, I think I've got the sweet spot at the moment.
Very good. I did ask Sebastian about further research and answers or things that need to be answered in this area that have not been answered. So let's play this clip with where things are heading.
I think that, that's very problematic, and I don't think that will be answered early in time, but I would like to see answers to several questions regarding, what are there specific adaptations to each intensity? And this is very difficult to answer because you cannot. It's when we are doing research with these topics, it's quite easy to prove associations, but it's much more difficult to prove causality. Because you are performing a training with a sample for 3 months, and the results have been that my mitochondrial density has increased. But it's very difficult to prove that it increased because of your intervention. No, so because you will need enormous samples, you will also need super controlled environment, which is not realistic in the training world, because you give the athlete a spreadsheet of what he must do, but you don't have total control of what he's doing during his entire day, So it's very difficult to isolate, and we don't really know. We do know that there are complementary adaptations from intensity and from volume and low intensity. What we do not know specifically whether, performing 3 minutes intervals in zone 5 does produce these specific adaptations.
Research into exercise science and research into sports medical / musculoskeletal stuff is hard. Mm. It's not the same as like doing a medical procedure where it's either done or it's not, and you can assess the outcome, or a drug. You take the drug or you take a placebo, assess the outcome. There's so many things that overlap it. And I did listen to a podcast with Inigo Milan, who's kind of a bit of a god in this area, like I said, and he made a really nice point. And his point was that the elite athletes get it right because they have to compete at the world's best level. And if you learn from what they're doing, then you're probably going to get it right yourself. Now, there needs to be nuance to that. Like, these guys can train 30 or 40 hours a week, whereas a lot of us can't. But I think that, trying to get a lot of research and study done is hard, but watching how the best do it can be quite valuable.
Yep, agree. I couldn't agree more. I've never conducted a trial. I've sort of been privy to the ins and outs of a few, but yeah, it is really hard in the physio world and the exercise science world. There's a lot of variables that take place, but success leaves clues, as some other people will also too. So the people at the best of their game will often have a few little training habits and a few training traits and a few strategies that will allow you to try and emulate yourself if you want to sort of take it to that next level.
Sebastian clearly is an impressive fellow. So I asked him, what's next?
In the next few months.
Okay.
2 months ago, I released a book on scientific training in cycling in Spanish, and next month it will be released in the English version. So I think that's the next big event for me.
What's the book called?
Cycling 2.0, evidence-based training for peak performance on the bike.
And where will people be able to find it?
First on my website.
So if you want to go to Sebastian's website, it's sitkotraining.com. Sitko spelled Sitko, training.com. I think it'd be a good read. Particularly, he is quite he's more focused on cycling than kind of the other endurance sports, but I think that it could be a really nice read, as is his paper. Mick, this is kind of bringing us to a close out of this Zone 2 stuff. What are the key takeaways from you after what we've discussed over the last couple of episodes?
For me, just learning and listening to Sebastian and yourself, Zone 2 certainly is something that is a lot easier than in terms of intensity. It's a much more of an easier level of exercise than what I'd imagined. I think the challenges with it is certainly time and monotony. I think they're probably the three things that I've sort of taken out of this to try and, I guess, discuss with patients moving forward, or even sort of work my own training plans around. They're probably the things to consider. I appreciate and I love how it's probably a little bit less intense than what I like, but the benefits to be gained from that quite substantial. I'm kind of already training as it is in probably a Zone 2 state for a couple of hours every week. If I clock up my 5 hours of walking the dog, I could probably go a bit more of a brisk pace. I must admit, my rate of perceived exertion, if I'm scoring it from 0 to 10, when I'm walking the dog, I'll probably sit on maybe like a 2 out of 10. I could probably sneak it up a little bit more. I think that would be my own lesson I just need to implement. But lots of take homes there for our listeners too. Personal things that you've taken on board.
I think the two key things for me to take away is that quality matters, and that if you're going to train high intensity, that is definitely part of what you should do, but it needs to be just 2 or 3 sessions a week of high quality, high intensity training with a undercurrent of this kind of low level aerobic training as well. So that's number one. The second thing I took away from it is to take away the obsession over exact numbers, and that if you're using the talk test and also like a RPE, for instance, that's good enough for most people. Actually, I've got a third. The third is just consolidated by Sebastian, and that is that take an individualized approach. Whilst it's great to kind of say this is like what the studies say and whatever, just do what works for you, because at the end of the day, you will know your body better than anyone else.
Yeah. No, I love it. I think he's made a very complex topic, and probably a topic that's overcomplicated on social media and in many podcasts done before us. And he's just sort of distilled it down into a really simplified, practical version of probably what people need to know. I'm grateful for the opportunity for him to come on our little podcast and hear his wisdom.
Yeah, no, me too. And if you do, for those who are listening or watching, if you do have any topics that revolve around this Zone 2 training. There's been a few things that we've just touched on that we'd be more than happy to kind of push into greater detail in a future episode. So always, we do read your comments. We can't respond to everyone, but please comment along, and we'll be really interested to see what you'd like us to tackle next. Thanks, Mick. That was a good chat.
Well done. Zone 2 in the books. Huge meaty topic. Well done. Looking forward to the last couple of episodes before Christmas.
Me too. All right, that's a wrap for this episode of Exercise Matters. If you enjoyed the chat, make sure you subscribe, leave a review and share it with your mates. A quick disclaimer, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not medical or individual advice. Always seek guidance from a qualified health professional for your specific needs. Big thanks to our sponsors, Premax, High Performance Skincare, made for high performance people, and Learn.physio, world-class education for health professionals. Catch you next time.
See you next time.